All right, ladies and gentlemen, thanks for having me. Exciting time, my first time presenting at this conference. So I'm excited and I hope you find what we have to present as informational. So I'm going to handle the environmental aspects of a demolition project, from the planning and going through the project and what you can do to be successful. So the question we have is, why does environmental compliance matter? And the answer is, environmental compliance is important to save public health, obviously, to preserve the natural resources that we have, to prevent any environmental damage. So, any remediation project has to account for these when you're starting the planning process for it. So, one of the things with, protecting public health, that's the main reason. So, these demolition projects, can release hazardous chemicals into the air, water, and soil. If they're not properly managed, it can cause a major problem downstream. So compliance will mean that your risks are minimized. When you preserve the natural resources, obviously, that's pretty self-explanatory. Our natural resources are finite, and we need to do what we can to try to save them. And then, of course, preventing environmental damage. We don't want to have your project be on the news, local or national, tied to your company to say, hey, they contaminated the lake, the creek, or whatever. So moving on, so the keys to environmental compliance. So the first thing you want to do is complete a site characterization and assessment of that site. And that's understanding everything you have. What waste do we have at the site? What are we going to have to remediate? Understanding the geology and the hydrology of the site. That's very important when you're getting into the environmental aspects of these projects. The next one would be the regulatory, or helping develop a hazardous waste plan. So again, trying to deal with the materials you have, identify them, and what are we going to do to take care of these items? Developing an air quality management plan. You can have things like releasing of dust or releasing of chemicals, and you want to make sure that you have planned for this, that it's completely covered in what you're going to do. You need to develop, obviously, a water quality and management plan. A lot of times, you're going to have storms, and you're going to have rain, and you're going to have runoff, and you want to make sure that your dangerous items and dangerous chemicals that could damage environments are not being put into the water and the soil and running off of your site. Making sure that roll-off boxes are covered and things like that. And of course, developing a plan for waste management. You're going to have waste, and you have to have a plan. So these are all the steps, going into there. Also perform all required monitoring and reporting. But these are all the steps that you need to have going into these things that will make your project a success and lead you to not be in any trouble with any regulatory agencies. So just to get into regulatory permitting, you must obtain permits from whatever agencies there are. And that can obviously be the US EPA, state environmental agencies, and any local authorities. And you need to research that, especially for the local. What are you going to need? The EPA, it's pretty easy to find information on what you need, but sometimes local authorities are a little bit harder to deal with just because we don't know, they operate different, and we don't know from jurisdiction to jurisdiction what they may be. So we're going to talk about the types of environmental hazards that you may run into. You may run into asbestos, mercury, lead and lead-based paints, PCBs, gases, and fluids. Different kind of hazardous fluids that may or may not exist at your site. So these aren't everything, but these are the highlighting of things that you will run into at a demo site. So waste handling and disposal, you need to identify companies that can handle the wastes. And that's doing some research. If you've done demo before, you're probably going to have a list of companies that are qualified and can do this work. And again, goes to my next point, you want to check the qualifications. If you're going to use a different company, you want to make sure that this is something they do. You don't want it to be their first time doing this. You want to make sure that they understand, this is what I'm doing, this is what I have to do. Make sure they have the facilities and everything they need to manage this project. Determine the final waste facilities. So you may hire somebody to handle this, but they may not be the ultimate disposal facility for this material. It may end up going somewhere else. For instance, a company might handle roll-off boxes, and they may be handling the roll-off boxes for you of the waste, but do you know what landfill that roll-off box is going to go to? And that's very critical to make sure it's being handled properly, disposed of properly, and in compliance with all regulations. Again, know the regulations regarding paperwork. I had an environmental coordinator tell me 20 years ago, he said, you'll go to jail if you don't do the paperwork right. So that's just one of those things that always stuck with me. So I'm very much of a stickler to make sure that the paperwork is done right, because I don't think I'd look good in orange. So I pulled this quote from the EPA website. Don't assume that just because you hire a contractor that you are not responsible for the compliance with federal environmental regulations. You will be held responsible for the failure of a contractor to comply with federal regulations. So I can tell you this, to quote a Taylor Swift song, the EPA has a blank space and they will write your name. They do not, that is a list you do not want to be on. So just make sure that everybody that you're hiring in is following the rules of compliance. Because if they don't, you can't pull the card like, well, I thought they were going to do the right thing. If they didn't, you're on the hook for it. So identification and education for this, it's assessing, an assessment should identify environmental hazards and material. So we talked about that in the beginning of doing that environmental plan and the assessment. So you should identify where these hazards are, where's this hazardous material, and basically what we need to do with it. So you also need to then identify how these items are going to be managed. This material is going to this company, this material is going to this company, and make sure that everyone who's involved in this stuff can understand where everything is and where it needs to be managed. One of the biggest things I've seen working with demo projects is that the items are not all marked properly as to where the hazards are and where they need to go. So a lot of companies have used color coding, they've used caution tape, they've used different kind of paint markers, just so there's an understanding for the employees working in the area of what is going where and what the hazards are. And again, educating the employees that are at the site. Just a real quick story. I was working with a demo project in Philadelphia, and the employees got to where the PCB transformer was on the 9th floor, and they just decided to shove it off the 9th floor to the ground. So when our truck arrived, it was laying on its side, cracked open, and had no more PCB fluid in it. So they created a hazard, and it basically came down to that their employees didn't know not to knock that transformer from the 9th floor to the ground. So education of the employees working in those areas is very critical, that you don't have mistakes that could end up causing an environmental disaster. And of course, and educating the employees as to the methods that are used. So if you use all these methods, color coding, caution tape, paint markers, whatever you may do, stickers, you want to make sure that all the employees working in those areas are aware what these mean, so they know not to knock the transformer off the 9th story of a building. So then we go into environmental sustainability. Environmental sustainability is a big topic. It's very important to this conference because we're very big into recovering your investment and recycling materials. So that's the first thing we want to do. We want to make sure that if there's a reuse or a recycling mechanism for this material that we're having on this site, that we can go ahead and recycle that material. We want to reuse materials from the demolition sites. So anything that you think you could reuse for, if the site is being repurposed, you can go ahead and use that material, and you're not having to buy more material. So you're saving the cost of buying this material, you're saving the trucking. We know trucking costs is expensive. Then on a sustainability side, you're not using diesel fuel. It just works well if you can reuse material that's already at the site. Then you're also limiting the material that's going to a landfill. Landfills can fill up, and then that's the end of them. They have to be shut down, and we have to go somewhere else to dump this material. The more material we can stop from going to the landfill, the longer that landfill's life can be. So that's, again, trying to reuse the material and limit what we're sending off just for garbage. Properly handling the fluids for recycling. If some of you were in here earlier, I did a little bit of an educational thing on mixing of fluids. And there's money to be had in fluid recycling. But if you mix fluids together of various types, those fluids become useless. You can't recycle them. Oil people only want a pure product. So the story I have with this is, I was just actually telling it about an hour ago. I was working with a demo site, and the guy called me. He said, I have 15 totes of hydraulic fluid. Do you think you can find an outlet? And I said, yeah, I'll talk to my oil brokers. I think I can find an outlet. So of course, everybody wants a sample. Well, I sent my guy up there, and he called me. He goes, there's 15 totes here, and every one of them is a different color. So I said, well, collect 3 samples and bring them back. And they didn't look anything alike. I sent them out to all my oil people, and they're like, yeah, there's nothing we can do. And I mean, my customer he was upset, not with me. He was upset with his people because they dumped everything they could in these totes. And he could have got money out of 15 totes of hydraulic fluid, and he ended up having to pay to get rid of those. So, the money, especially, I deal in transformer oil. So, I mean, you could go, just by mixing fluid into it, you could go from a load that's worth $12,000 to a load that's going to cost you $2,000 to get rid of, depending on what you put in it. So it's really good to know what you're doing with your fluids. Purity of product is absolutely critical on any kind of recycling. So, and when you mix fluids, there's no going back. So that's just my it's like I say, it's been my mission in life to educate people on why not to mix fluids for recycling. And that's what I have, and I'll turn it over to Ann to keep this presentation moving along. All right, so the big green one, and then that one backs up at the end.
Okay. Hi, I'm Ann Bailey. I'm the president of A-Line EDS. Been in the industry for about 20 years, and also at this conference for several years as well. So I'm going to cover the transformer and oil field equipment recycling portion of substation, power plants, other demo projects. So I like to talk a lot about project communication, and I spoke about this a little bit yesterday, but where does it start? So a lot of the times, and we've kind of seen this morph over this last several years, is IR gets contacted when they're ready to throw it in the trash, and it's already set to the side and done. So one thing that people have done to be pretty innovative is finding out when it starts. So often these transformers, oil field equipment, it's years in planning. It's 2 years, it's 3 years out. So working with your internal customers to find out when those valued assets are going to be coming out, and then looking at ways to help the process. So bringing your experts in, your removal experts in ahead of time to say, hey, we could remove this in place. We can save money by not moving this. Yes, this can be done where it's at. No, this can't. Also to provide budgetary numbers for the project. So I think yesterday we talked about money going back to those capital projects, and it's been pretty important. And what we found is those internal customers and the project management and the engineering departments are very thankful for the IR department when they can plan some of that budgetary return back into their project. So getting with the internal customers, and then, like I said, involving the experts that are going to be involved in the process. So project details and requirements. What information is needed? Time frame for removal, whether you want to relocate it or do it in place, your live surroundings, your surfaces below, any ground obstacles that there can be, nameplate, equipment info, needs to be legible and complete, outline drawings, is the equipment truckable, is it going to require some dismantling on site, and of course oil analyticals so you know what you're working with there. So often we find that there's little snippets of information. So what's really important for IR is that the more information you can provide and the more detail you can provide, the more accurate pricing you're going to get, the better return you're going to get on that investment. So there's a better understanding. Why are the details important? To get accurate and competitive pricing, to make sure that you are getting the most for your assets. It also helps avoid costly mistakes and delays. So just communication, the more information there is, there's no questions going into it. It also provokes thoughts. How can you improve the process? How can we minimize the work that's going to be done on site? Can we eliminate a whole extra process in this? which also returns in a happy internal customer. So like I said, a lot of improvements have been made with IR departments working across their organization and early on to plan some of those dollar savings for them and also make the project more efficient. It may save days in their schedule, which when it comes to an outage is obviously a significant cost savings, and then they can keep getting the new equipment installed more efficiently. Avoids any change orders when the information is good, and then of course just communication and details always improve processes. Some of the barriers is sometimes the communication is only controlled by one person. So what we've found is it is often important to, what I found in the most successful projects is when those substation folks, the project managers, possibly the engineering department is involved to share information and create transparency rather than a game of telephone where one person is having to communicate all of that. A formalized Q&A is helpful, but a discussion also helps clear up any misconceptions or anything that's lost in translation. Closed-mindedness, not being open to new ideas, not being open to change. This is the way we've always sold assets. This is the way we've always done it. I know sometimes that's a struggle, and then it's also a struggle to convince others to change their ways as well. But there's always new ways to do things. So bid versus value. So sometimes you do get paid for an asset, but where can you improve the process and save your organization money, like I talked about, inefficiencies across the project during the outage? How can you avoid safety and environmental incidents? And what's the value of that efficiency of the project? And then having a basic template used for every project. A lot of these sites are very different, and they're the same and not the same. So just being flexible, making sure to answer questions, have that information available. I know Sean talked yesterday about making a site visit something that's an option to people as well. And then feedback. So give your vendors feedback. We love to hear it. Anyone should love to hear it, whether it's good and bad. Obviously, we like to hear the good. But how can we make it better next time? So this is just a little project that I like to share, which kind of encompasses a lot of what we discussed. I like this one because the conversation to complete the project this way actually happened in a trade show at the IR conference. So this customer had 2 large units. This was a repeat project. Each unit was over 1.5 million pounds a piece. They had some previous incidents at their sites that they never considered doing these in place. We kind of had a discussion and said, hey, it could be done this way. Have you ever thought about doing it this way? He knew he was going to get some pushback in his organization as well, trying to get them to do it. Like I said, they'd experienced the nightmares. But after an on-site meeting and a pretty detailed plan that was put together, making both his internal customer happy, they got a pretty significant return on this project. However, the savings was about nearly $500,000 and not having to relocate those transformers. On top of that, they were able to do it within 2 weeks. Both units got taken out in 2 weeks, saved time on their outage, minimize multiple other contractors needing to be on site for ultimately what was going to be torn down and removed anyway. So again, it just kind of encompassed that new idea, open-mindedness, working with your internal team to have a successful project and still get a high dollar return on your assets. I want to cover some of the power plant demo do's and don'ts. So I know Brad kind of covered some of these, but things to consider. Obviously, the return on your assets, safety, environmental handling, and risk. I'm gonna reiterate hiring a reputable contractor and knowing the ultimate disposal site. So I know there's been some nightmares out there. We talk about cradle to grave. They're always going to go back to the owner in the deepest pocket. So you still need to ensure, even if there is someone in the middle, that they are using approved disposal facilities, approved contractors, because it is still your property. Understanding the timelines, there's obviously critical timelines for those projects, and then still having those certificates of recycling and understanding that cradle to grave liability. This just shows some photos from a larger power plant. This is a power plant demo don't. So you can see this video here. We were not doing this side of the plant demo with the transformers, but we happened to be here doing some other ones. So you see this wall coming down. We can't really see in the video, but you can see it in the photos as that transformer tips all the way back down there. So the ones that are circled, the brown, very likely PCV bushings then cracked and were leaking all over, and the unit was nearly on its side. So this was just something that you can see the high dollar assets were going to be ruined. Probably some environmental liability came out of this, although I don't know the end result as we weren't working with that demo contractor at the time. And likely went back to the project owner. And this is some more power plant demo don'ts. I think it's interesting. Sometimes they still think you're getting money for those assets. And I think the slide that was missing shows very neatly packed core steel from a transformer, a very clean site, things packaged, making sure the disposal is proper. This you can see there's core steel piled up. So they diminished this value by probably 90% by demoing it this way. So you really know you weren't getting a return on that asset because all of that money is laying in that pile. The bottom picture here shows, there's an arrow there, shows some bushings that this contractor was kind of dabbling in the business, threw them on the ground, they're crushed all over, there's oil on the ground. You can see the one on the right. It looks like a dinosaur took a bite out of the transformer. Again, contractors that don't know what they're doing, they're trying to get the value out of it. But in the same note, there's unsafe work environments, environmental liability across the board, and you're just absolutely not getting the value if you're selling it to handling that. The lower right-hand picture was actually a transformer that someone had bought at an auction. They came in, they were able to manage to get the copper off, didn't really need or know how to get the core steel out apparently. Oil was all over the ground, bushings, no idea where those were. And so we actually just came in and cleaned up the small legs of the core. So that's all I have for my section. And I'll introduce Cheryl. This is Cheryl. She is filling in for Joe. So.
Yeah, I'm not Mr. Joe Vendetti. He was the specialist for the demo company. And when I heard he was going to be on the panel, I said, break a leg. And he literally broke his leg. So I found out on Monday that I was going to be filling in. So bear with me. Okay, the agenda. We're going to do some definitions, some safety homework, experience, fatalities, cost, project risks and costs, communication, expectations and costs, estimating the demolition, dismantling, decommissioning, and remediation, D, 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 and R. So the definitions: demolition is conventional demolition is utilizing heavy equipment to remove structures and equipment. Dismantling is using manual labor and or rigging to take things apart to reuse at another location or to remove with the least amount of impact at a working plant. Decommissioning, that's the draining, the purging, disposal of inactive and de-energized systems. And remediation, the legal removal and disposal of hazardous asbestos, PCBs, lead, any of that kind of material. And you can add another D for disposal. So, safety homework, very important. Hire contractors with an EMR under 1 and a TRIR of 0 and DART of less than 0.5. No fatalities in the last 10 years. These are considered the world-class by National Safety Council. Like, these are what they lay out as the best record you want with your contractor for your specialized demo. Look at the number of days and years without a lost time accident. And of course, use a team approach. Everyone needs to be in the know. Owner, contractor, engineer, use a proven risk management approach. So everybody's got a work plan and a safety plan. Work the plan, plan the work. That's very important. We want everybody to get home the way they arrived. Hire contractors that have experience. All experience isn't equal. For example, like if you demolished a GE industrial building or a Ford plant, it's not the same as a power plant. Proven contractors are skilled in multiple environments. Whether working, if you've got a power plant that's close to a substation, the substation is still powered. You got to be able to take down the things that need to be taken down without hurting what's still in operation. Something close to water, things like that. There's a lot of important factors to consider other than just let's take down the plant. So in 2023, Joe's a great stat guy. He's a big safety stat guy. He found out that 5,486 fatalities in 2023. Now that's across all board, any construction demo, it could have been a house job, anything like that. That's the total number of fatalities. 407 in the last years alone were tied to actual DNR activities, which is a lot. 2024, in the first 6 months in the US, 37 demolition fatalities in less than 50 days. So it's important to make sure that your contractor is a safety first contractor. So are they all preventable? Yes, they really are. And in the end, was it really cheaper? OSHA citations to the contractor and a state public utility commission recently fined an owner $5.5 million for lack of oversight and poor vetting. Plaintiff attorneys use these violations and citations in building gross negligent cases for the deceased family members. The alleged plausible deniability approach doesn't work anymore. You need to hire the biggest and best EPC or use our own staff and stay safe. OSHA, just as an example, say Smith Company hires ABC Demolition to do a job. Someone working on that job is severely injured or worse. ABC Demo will be sued and likely into bankruptcy. They will also go after Smith Company to try to get a settlement or something else. They're going to go for whoever's got the deepest pockets. It's going to happen. Anne alluded to some of this and when she was speaking, but the more you know about the site, you give the contractor the most information, it's less complicated, it's safer, it's more cost effective, you're gonna get a better estimate. Are there buildings, structures, overhead wires, switch yards? Will this make implosion possible? Especially on larger projects, implosion is definitely a factor that's gonna save some money and safety. Knowing what these risks will add is not just dollars to the price. The more man hours worked to take things down or apart manually increases the chance for an injury or a fatality. Okay, how are your neighbors about dust? I mean, the dust is going to happen. How sensitive are they? You have to have a dust mitigation plan. That has to be part of your planning when you're doing things. Are there air restrictions? Is there a chance for an environmental release into water or air that's going to cost you money? And then I think Fred's going to do these two, the next couple.
We need two people to take over for Joe. So basically, when you have demolition, a lot of times you take over a site and the customer says, hey, the site's been clean. But there's two things I want to say this quickly. One time, if you can actually keep somebody like a maintenance manager on the job with the demolition contractor, because very rarely there's drawings or schematics of various lines of chemicals. So that would be helpful for identification. A lot of these guys have been there for over 30 years. And second, before we start doing demolition, we'll actually do some air gapping, blind flanging of the lines and draining it and gravity fed draining of lines for decommissioning. And also, whether it's chemical, power plant, or a facility or a building that was built pre-1978, you most likely have asbestos. So one thing I want to say about this slide is make sure you have your asbestos survey completed for asbestos, hazardous materials. It's due identification, because once you put your costs and budgets together and then all of a sudden you find asbestos, you're gonna have a bunch of change orders, which is not a fault of the contractor, but a fault of the client. So, and also one point that Joe mentioned was FAA. When you have large stacks over a certain height, you have to notify the authorities about that. And also, when a facility mostly goes cold and dark, you don't have power at the facility. So we have to put in a backup generator to keep the lights for any kind of air traffic patterns. Thanks, Cheryl.
So site security, this is really important. Did I go forward? For a couple things. First of all, if you've got valuable assets on the site, materials, anything like that, theft is obviously something that you have to consider. Also a safety issue. So you want to make sure 24/365 what's going to be important for you guys to have your everything covered as far as safety and security. Because also when you do DNR, it leaves huge holes, piles of, like some of your pictures showed, piles of rebar and things like that. So that's not something you want to. Communication, identify what you expect. There's a lot of reports that come with a job like this, especially because some of these can take many, many years. So how often do you want them? Daily, weekly, monthly, how many meetings you want? Reports might be things like man hours, first aid incidents, spills, progress on the job, all of that kind of thing. What data do you want? C&D manifest, which is construction and demo debris, scrap tickets, somebody picks something up, there's going to be some money involved there, schedule updates, things change on the job site, and you need to know all that information, how often do you want it, that kind of thing. We have a chain of command, most companies do. Number one is going to be your project manager on the site. Under him is going to be a superintendent reporting to him, then there'll be a foreman. The next there'll be labor. And also really important, there's going to be a safety manager that has a dotted line to all these people and also has direct access to the corporate manager or whoever's handling the hiring company, whoever's the spokesman for the company that did the hiring of the demolition contractor. Billings as well. Somebody's going to get paid, so you're going to want to figure out the schedule of how that's going to happen too. So the cost in a DD&R project boil down to staff, project managers, safety engineers, operators, burners, drivers, truck drivers, laborers, excavators, loaders, lifts, water trucks. It's a lot. Backfill, fuel, oxygen, asbestos, PCB electricians, asbestos, once again, that C&D, contaminated concrete, units and weights. W. Insurance, bonding, overhead, and profit. I go over that to get to this. Well, not this, the next one. Plant scrap and assets. There's several different types of materials that you're going to have. As asset recovery people, you're really aware of that. Transformers, switchgear, valves, pumps, mills. There's ferrous. Those are plate and structural. Heavy metal. Light iron, shred, cast. Non-ferrous that's good stuff. Copper, bare bright stainless steel, nickel or nickel derivatives, high value alloys. And the price changes daily, hourly, monthly, yearly. That's a regular moving thing. So we're going to add up the labor, the equipment, the materials, the disposal, the subs, the overhead and profit, and that's going to be the cost of your project. We're going to take the cost of your project, and we're going to talk about a letter of credit or bonding, whatever you're going to do to secure that. Then we're going to add that. And then at the end of the day, the cost of the project, minus your equipment, your scrap, and your assets, kind of that last slide that we just talked about, and anything else that comes into play, will be subtracted. And at the end of the day, you're going to either pay the contractor or they're going to pay you, depending on how many assets you had. And that happens quite often. If you get a big project with a lot of assets on it, we'll give you a check. We'll get the whole job done. So I think that's all I have.
Hello, my name is Michael, and I'm the auctioneer at Yellow Tag. I've been an auctioneer my whole life, and certainly when I started doing auctions on something like a demo project was rare to never, because just the nature of the beast, having a live auction at a place where all this safety concerns going on just didn't happen. But today, auctioning off assets is a viable option. Certainly want to weigh the risks of selling the items versus scrapping them. We like to say, stop scrapping your profits, because when you scrap an item for $1,000 that taking it through an auction route might generate $10,000, $15,000, $20,000, there's a delta there that can impact your bottom line. And you want to balance that against how does this impact your project? Because initially it might sound great to get 18,000 more dollars, but then you realize that you're going to have 20,000 more in costs that kind of eats it all up. So there's always a balancing act when you're deciding, should you take something to market or should you continue to scrap it? And as you go through this with an auction partner, they can help guide you on what items might work well, what items might not. And at the end of the day, your operations team just has to analyze, can we get this out so that we can sell it? So the auction process itself has multiple steps. We start out and a team comes and works to identify what's going to be sold in the auction, get the information, get the pictures, and get that listed into some kind of an auction catalog. At that point, you take that out to the market. You need to do some advertising and bring more buyers to bear on that auction, because having an auction with only one bidder is not very exciting. Just kind of goes nowhere. So you want to bring a lot of people. And part of the reason you're taking these items to the auction market versus some of the standard ways you've been selling items is because instead of going out to the 4 or 5 guys who you always take these kind of assets to and getting some numbers and deciding who to sell to, an auction might take it out to 200, 300 people that can increase your value for it. So you're going to do some marketing. Then the auction's going to take place. And again, at a demolition project, you're not going to have a live auction. You do not want 200 people driving up in their pickup trucks, milling around your demo site. We're going to do it online. The bidding will take place virtually. Inspections, if they're allowed at all, will be very limited and controlled. It'll go through the bidding process. The high bidder will be identified. The auctions on that item will end. Invoices will get generated. Then the money gets collected in an orderly way. The items get picked up by the buyers in a very controlled manner because, again, this is a demolition project and we just don't want people showing up randomly. All the costs involved in doing it are taken off and you get a check. And so very similar to just sending something out to be scrapped and then the scrap company sends you a check back. In a well-run auction process, an auction partner will handle the lion's share of the work to get the items out to market, sold, picked up, shipped out, and you'll get a check. So in a well-run process, it will not be significantly different than taking it out and scrapping it. So when we look at what kind of things make sense taking them into a broader market, all the support equipment that you'll find in a plant, the compressors, the generators, cooling towers, chillers, boilers, all of that, all the plant support equipment is always a good fit. Certainly post-pandemic, the electrical infrastructure has become really hot, and that market has grown significantly as the costs for electrical infrastructure have doubled, tripled, and more. The market for value-added resellers of that equipment to buy equipment from plants, especially demo sites, when handled properly, has made a huge impact and can bring a great return versus looking at a panel like we've got on the screen and saying, well, there's $4,000 in scrap when it's, auctioned off at $45,000 and your removal cost is only a couple thousand more. It really can make an impact on your return. You'll have shop areas, office areas, just equipment that was used to support the facility Or if it is a more of a manufacturing facility, perhaps they've left equipment behind that's in place. Those are always good items to discuss having an auction on. And what's become a bigger opportunity is smaller items, down to pumps, 25, 50, 100 horsepower that historically have just been grabbed by an excavator and thrown in the scrap bin and bring hundreds of dollars. To work with a partner and start having those bring thousands or tens of thousands of dollars really can move the needle. Again, always trying to strike the right balance on what's the time added to the project, what's the work added versus what we're going to get for it. And, rolling stock is sometimes on these sites, you end up with rolling stock, some of it kind of old and ugly, but, we've, as long as I've been in the auction business, we've always said junk sells. So, it can be older rolling stock, and it's still, you build a little auction for it, it's off in the corner of the project, and it can be surprising how much you'll get for it. So the kind of the crown gem, when you walk into a facility, if they've got a good supply room, there's different ways to take that to market, take it to market in bulk, work with an auctioneer, and you can break that down. All those items on the shelf can be broken down and sold individually, and that'll really amplify the return you can get on it. But when you walk into a place and they've left a pretty good supply room, that's certainly something to consider, with an auctioneer or another partner. And then tanks outside are another thing. We were up in booth 16. We always appreciate coming to the show. I appreciate the opportunity to talk with you about having some auctions and just something to think about to increase the return on your projects.
I want to thank everybody on the panel. Any questions for anybody here?
Thank you, Karen.
And it may be more of a comment than a question, but maybe I'll follow up with a question. My name's Karen LeBlond, and I'm here with KBR, Kellogg Brown and Root, and we're new associate members. I've talked to a lot of you already. We are new associate members in the organization, and we're an EPCM contractor that does projects for owners. So the one thing I'll say relative to this topic about not scrapping your profits, and I agree because I've been on the other side, it's a boon to the owner to get the money out of the asset. But the other thing that happens there is that you're facilitating project work and growth for somebody else by not destroying the electrical distribution panel or whatever else was on your pictures. Those things are valuable to other owners. Maybe they're startups. The prices have gone through the roof. Delivery times have extended tremendously. You engineer, design something, and you go to purchase it, and you're not going to get it fabricated for a year plus. So to all the owners in the room, to all the demo contractors in the room, to the asset management people in the room, thank you for saving these things. And as a new member to the organization, we're looking to buy these things. So I know I've asked a lot of you, how can we get on your lists? But finish the thought, right? Go further with the topic. It's not just about selling it and making the money, it's selling it, making the money, and helping the next venture capitalize and doing the greener thing, right? It's the more sustainable, it's the higher order, more sustainable thing to do with the asset. So thanks, good topic.
All right, I appreciate your comments.
Hi again. This is Ben again. I talk a lot, but I just want to make a comment for both Brett and is that Brett and Michael. So myself works specifically in ITS and electronics industry. So our core value is about reuse, reuse before recycle. So, for Michael here, you try to get everything, reusable to auction to the next owner, which, really helpful and keep them from landfill. And well, the bread here, we recycle to recover the materials from all these scrap or, and because there's a lot of precious, if you don't if you do pay attention, a lot of precious metals, they are being used to a lot of assets you guys have already invested it in. And the price of the precious metals went up big for the past 5 to 10 years. And for those demolition jobs, you probably would encounter a lot of those assets. So it's a really good return on your investment if you do consider not just the ferrous or non-ferrous scrap, but also the additional supporting assets, especially ITS, which has been equipped with all the facilities and your investment throughout the years. And the percentage is going way up, and gradually increase every year. So this is the comment I want to make.
Technology. Yeah, I mean, just to go to your point, because I kind of wanted to answer a question, so that's fun. But that's what we talked about. It's the sustainability aspect of these projects when you're in your planning stage, and you need to identify the items that you can reuse and that can be reused in the project. I mean, some of the things I read about, like even reusing concrete and turning it into gravel and things like that. But what you're doing is reusing electronics, and yeah, I mean, there's all kinds of stuff. I mean, from the transformer market, I mean, we know it's a year, 2 years, 3 years to get a new one. And the market has gone crazy. So trying to resell and reuse everything we can. I mean, the panels, that's a big market right now too. Everybody wants this stuff. But yeah, as much as we can look at and say this can be reused, that's an important aspect to any of this. We have a question over here.
Thank you, Jane. Hey there, Brandy Harlow, CEO of South Post Oak Recycling Center. We're a metal recycling company out of Houston, Texas. I really appreciate, and we service nationally. I appreciate this perspective, and I appreciate the order in which one would look at recyclables. Reuse, obviously, repurpose. I think we would be remiss, though, if we discredit the value of recycling if you're at a point where there's no reuse option for you. And because it's directly linked to sustainability. You take the copper you all are getting rid of, the aluminum, it's melted down and it's made into new material. And so I just don't want us to lose sight of that. Yes, there can be value, obviously, in these other elements, but I think recycling and it melted down and made into new material, that's directly back to your sustainability, because now you're diverting waste. It couldn't be repurposed, but I just wanted to make sure that we weren't losing sight of true recyclabilities in another lens.
No, that's a great comment, and I think we all here, being IR professionals, we practice landfill diversion, and landfill would be the last thing we want to do. And it goes to the major theme of the IR organization, IRA, is practicing your 7 Rs. So I think they're great points. Thank you for mentioning that. Any other questions for the panel? I want to thank you for everybody for listening. Thank you.
Thank you all.